The memory of Earth burned brighter than the planet itself. Satellite imagery showed a world consumed. Coastal megacities submerged, once fertile continents reduced to dust bowls, and massive solar radiation storms that had stripped away entire atmospheric layers. Humanity's homeworld was no longer a cradle, but a tomb. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before the holographic display, her fingers tracing the ghostly outlines of continents that had once teemed with life. At 52, she bore the weight of generations. Her eyes reflected both the devastation of the past and the desperate hope of the future. Behind her, the massive underground complex of New Geneva hummed with the last vestiges of human technological might. 37% genetic diversity preservation, she muttered, reviewing the colony manifest. Each person selected wasn't just a colonist, but a carefully calculated genetic resource. Doctors, engineers, fighters, researchers, each chosen not just for their skills, but for their potential to rebuild civilization from potentially nothing. The Prometheus Rising was more than a ship. It was humanity's ultimate insurance policy. Marcus Chen approached, his military posture a stark contrast to the clinical environment. A veteran of the resource wars, and one of the last commanders of the United Earth Defense Force, he represented humanity's martial legacy. His cybernetic eye, a remnant of conflicts past, scanned the holographic displays with a precision that spoke of decades of combat experience. "The final launch window is in 72 hours, he reported, his voice a controlled monotone that barely masked an undercurrent of tension. Planetary defense systems are at 62% operational capacity. We'll be vulnerable during the initial launch sequence." Elena nodded, understanding the risk. The remaining Earth governments, a fractured coalition of surviving city-states and underground complexes, had pooled their last resources into this mission. Failure was not an option. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo entered, her arms laden with data pads and quantum storage devices. The chief engineering architect of the Prometheus Rising, she represented the pinnacle of human technological innovation. Her dark skin was etched with intricate bioluminescent circuits, a testament to the human capacity for adaptation and technological integration. "We've completed the final genetic stabilization protocols," she reported. "The cryogenic chambers are calibrated to maintain genetic integrity during the 127-year journey. Our predictive algorithms suggest a 94.3% chance of successful colonist preservation." A moment of silence filled the room. 94.3% meant that out of the 10,000 colonists, approximately 600 might not survive the journey. An acceptable loss by the brutal mathematics of human survival. The Prometheus Rising was a marvel of desperate engineering. Measuring nearly 3 kilometers in length, it was part ship, part mobile genetic repository, part terraforming platform. Multiple redundant systems, adaptive AI cores, and modular technological platforms made it more than a vessel. It was a potential seed of human civilization. Marcus pulled up the final mission parameters. Kepler 452 bits shows promising initial scans. Gravity at 1.2 Earth standard. Atmospheric composition potentially breathable with moderate terraforming. Liquid water detected in multiple regions. It's our best shot. Elena's hand touched a small locket around her neck, a photograph of her daughter, who had died during the third climate collapse. This mission was more than a scientific endeavor. It was a promise, a commitment to survival that transcended individual lives. "Prepare for final system checks," she commanded. Humanity's last hope is about to leave its dying cradle. Outside the complex, the world was a wasteland. Radiation storms danced across a landscape of shattered cities and dead landscapes. But inside, hope burned bright, a fire that would not be extinguished. The countdown to humanity's greatest journey had begun. The first breath of Novus nearly killed Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Atmospheric filters screamed warnings as toxic particulates overwhelmed the initial protective systems. What should have been a controlled descent became a violent battle against an alien environment that seemed determined to reject human life. The Prometheus Rising had split into multiple landing modules, each designed to disperse the colonists and increase survival chances. As Elena's module crashed through layers of sulfuric atmosphere, emergency systems fired with precision. Magnetic stabilizers fought against wind currents that reached nearly 300 kilometers per hour, cutting like liquid blades against the ship's hull. Structural integrity at 62%, the AI's voice remained maddeningly calm. Recommended course of action: immediate emergency landing. When they touched down, it wasn't a landing. It was a controlled catastrophe. The landscape of Novus stretched out like a nightmare of geological brutality. Razor-sharp crystalline formations jutted from ground that seemed to breathe, shifting, expanding, contracting with temperature variations that defied human understanding. Ambient temperature fluctuated between -40 and +80 degrees Celsius within minutes. Marcus Chen was the first to emerge, his tactical exosuit a marvel of human engineering. Designed to adapt to extreme environments, the suit was more like a living organism than a piece of equipment. Nano-adaptive layers shifted color and molecular density, providing protection against the hostile environment. Initial perimeter scan complete, he reported, his augmented vision cutting through toxic mists. 3 landing modules have sustained critical damage. Estimated survivor count: approximately 7,200 of the original 10,000. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo was already in motion. Her engineering team deployed molecular stabilization drones, small robotic units that began immediately analyzing and processing local materials. Where other species might have despaired, humans saw opportunity in destruction. The first casualty came quickly. Dr. Michael Chen, no relation to Marcus, stepped outside without fully sealed protection. The atmospheric toxins burned through his suit's initial layers in seconds. By the time they could extract him, his body was a testament to the planet's lethal welcome. "We need a containment strategy," Aisha shouted over the communication channel, her hands already recalibrating their protective technologies. "These atmospheric conditions are unlike anything in our predictive models." Elena watched as the first emergency shelters began to take shape, modular units that could adapt, shift, and reconfigure based on environmental challenges. Each unit was essentially a mini-fortress, capable of protecting against radiation, toxic atmosphere, and potential external threats. Marcus's security teams worked with mechanical precision. Defensive perimeters were established not just with physical barriers, but with a network of quantum-entangled sensors that could detect movement across kilometers. Every rock, every crystal formation became a potential early warning system. "We're not just surviving," Marcus said, his cybernetic eye scanning the horizon. "We're learning how to make this world our own." By the end of the first 48 hours, the colony had transformed from a crash site to a fortified outpost. Molecular assemblers were breaking down local minerals, creating new compounds that could withstand the planet's brutal conditions. Protective domes began to form, their surfaces alive with adaptive technologies that could shift and change like living skin. 3 more colonists died during the initial establishment, but 7,197 remained, each one a potential seed of human civilization. Novus had thrown its worst at them. Humanity had not just survived. They had begun to adapt. 2 months after landing, Novus was no longer just a planet of survival. It had become a canvas of human ingenuity. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo stood in the central engineering hub, surrounded by holographic displays that pulsed with real-time data from thousands of sensors. The underground complex was a masterpiece of adaptive architecture, walls that could reconfigure, floors that could redistribute structural stress, and systems that learned and improved with each passing hour. "We're not just building a colony," she muttered to herself. "We're creating a living organism." The planetary defense grid was unlike anything conceived in human history. What started as a desperate survival mechanism had evolved into a multi-layered defensive network that transformed the entire landscape into a weapon. Molecular sensors could detect movement at microscopic levels. Adaptive camouflage systems could make entire sections of the colony invisible to external scanning. Marcus Chen's security teams had transformed from traditional military units into something entirely new. Each soldier was part warrior, part scientist, part systems analyst. Their training integrated quantum computing, xenobiological understanding, and adaptive combat techniques that could shift in milliseconds. Threat assessment protocols are no longer linear, Marcus explained during a strategy meeting. His cybernetic eye flickered through multiple spectrums of data. We're developing predictive systems that can anticipate potential threats before they even manifest. The underground complex stretched for kilometers beneath the planet's surface. But these were not simple tunnels. Each section was a modular system that could seal, redirect, or transform based on environmental or defensive needs. Entire sections could become defensive strongholds, medical facilities, or research centers within minutes. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the genetic adaptation programs. Colonists weren't just being protected, they were being prepared to thrive in this new environment. Targeted genetic modifications enhanced radiation resistance, improved metabolic efficiency, and increased sensory capabilities. Natural selection takes thousands of years, she told her team. We're compressing the timeline into months. Molecular assemblers worked continuously, breaking down local minerals and reconstructing them into materials never before seen. The planet's toxic atmosphere, once a threat, was now being transformed into a resource. Rare mineral compounds were extracted, processed, and integrated into their defensive systems. Training simulations pushed human capabilities to their absolute limits. Virtual reality systems combined with direct neural interfaces allowed colonists to experience and prepare for countless potential scenarios. A single training session could simulate hundreds of potential alien encounter scenarios, with each colonist learning and adapting in real time. Marcus's most innovative project was the adaptive response units, small, autonomous defense drones that could think, learn, and reconfigure themselves. Each unit was essentially a miniature AI with the capability to make split-second tactical decisions. They could combine, separate, and transform based on environmental needs. We're creating a defensive ecosystem, Marcus explained to Elena. Not just a static defense system, but a living, breathing network of protection. The colony's communication systems were equally revolutionary. Quantum entanglement communication arrays allowed instantaneous data transfer that couldn't be intercepted or decoded by traditional means. Each communication was a complex mathematical puzzle that changed with every transmission. As the first 6 months on Novus concluded, the colony had transformed from a crash site to something extraordinary. They weren't just surviving. They were redefining the very concept of human adaptation. Novus was no longer just a planet. It was becoming a fortress, a weapon, a promise. Humanity's first true interstellar colony was ready for whatever the universe might throw at them. The alien vessel appeared without warning, cutting through Novus's turbulent atmosphere like a quantum blade. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was reviewing genetic adaptation protocols when the first quantum ripple triggered the colony's early warning systems. Her hand instinctively touched the neural interface at her temple, activating a multilayered communication protocol that would make their response anything but predictable. Incoming unidentified vessel. The AI's voice was clinical, almost bored. Quantum signature does not match known galactic catalogs. Preliminary scan suggests advanced propulsion and stealth technologies. Marcus Chen was already in motion. His command center was a symphony of holographic displays and adaptive interfaces that seemed to breathe with technological life. Each screen showed multiple layers of potential scenarios, predictive models dancing across quantum computational matrices. "They're scanning us," he reported, his cybernetic eye filtering through dozens of electromagnetic and quantum spectrums. "But they're seeing exactly what we want them to see." The truth was a carefully constructed illusion. Where other species might have shown fear or aggression, the humans of Novus presented a meticulously crafted narrative of vulnerability. Sensor returns suggested a struggling colony, limited resources, minimal defensive capabilities. It was a lie so precisely constructed that it became its own form of truth. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo worked furiously in the Quantum Communications Center. Her fingers danced across interfaces that shifted and changed with each microsecond of interaction. "They're using a communication protocol based on resonant quantum entanglement," she muttered. "Fascinating. They're expecting a linear response." But humanity had never been good at being predictable. The alien vessel, a sleek construct of biomechanical design that seemed to pulse with its own form of consciousness, maintained a holding pattern. Its scanning beams were sophisticated, capable of penetrating multiple layers of molecular obfuscation. Yet they saw only what the humans wanted them to see. "Preliminary communication attempt detected," the AI announced. "Shall we respond?" Elena's smile was predatory. Not yet. The colony's defensive systems were a multi-layered masterpiece of misdirection. Quantum sensors created false readings. Molecular camouflage systems transformed the landscape, making the colony appear both more and less than it was. Underground systems could redistribute energy signatures, electromagnetic outputs, even quantum entanglement patterns. Marcus's tactical team was ready. But ready meant something entirely different for these humans. They weren't preparing for traditional combat. They were preparing for a war of information, of perception, of pure psychological strategy. "They're expecting a predictable response," Marcus explained to his team. "We're going to give them something entirely different." The first communication came as a seemingly innocent quantum pulse. To the alien vessel, it would appear as a standard colonization distress signal. But embedded within that signal was a complex mathematical algorithm that would begin to probe the very communication systems of the alien craft. Dr. Okonkwo had essentially created a quantum virus, a communication packet that was simultaneously a message, a probe, and a potential infiltration system. "First contact is never about the first words," Elena said, watching the holographic displays. "It's about the space between words, the possibilities, the potential." As hours passed, the alien vessel remained, scanning, watching, trying to understand. They had no idea what was coming. Humanity was about to redefine the very concept of first contact. The breakthrough came at 3:47 Nova Standard Time, in a laboratory that was part scientific facility, part alchemical workshop. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo stood motionless, her augmented eyes processing data streams that would have overwhelmed an ordinary human mind. The fragment of alien scanning technology, retrieved during their first encounter, pulsed with an almost organic complexity on the molecular analysis table. "It's not just technology," she whispered to herself. "It's a living system." The molecular assemblers around her hummed with potential. What had begun as simple adaptive manufacturing had evolved into something far more profound. Each assembler was now a quantum computational node, capable of breaking down and reimagining technological concepts at the most fundamental level. The alien scanning device had been more than just a piece of technology. It was a key, a Rosetta Stone of extraterrestrial engineering that would unlock humanity's most radical technological leap. Marcus Chen watched from the tactical observation room, his cybernetic eye tracking every microscopic change. The security team had transformed from traditional military personnel into something entirely new, part scientists, part warriors, part technological shamans. "We're not reverse engineering," Marcus explained to his team. "We're having a conversation with technology itself." The breakthrough came in layers. First, a method to manipulate quantum communication signatures that could effectively create invisible communication channels. Then, an adaptive camouflage system that could alter molecular structures in real time, making entire sections of the colony shift between visibility and invisibility. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the broader implications. This wasn't just about defense or communication. This was about redefining the very concept of technological adaptation. "Look at the quantum entanglement patterns," she told a group of young researchers. Traditional engineering asks how to solve a problem. Our approach asks how the problem can be transformed. The molecular assemblers could now create materials that defied traditional understanding. Defensive systems that could think. Communication networks that could predict and adapt. Weapons that were more like living organisms than traditional armaments. One of the most remarkable developments was the adaptive energy system. Using principles gleaned from the alien technology, they could now convert the planet's most hostile environmental conditions directly into usable energy. Radiation storms that would have destroyed other civilizations became power sources. Toxic atmospheric compounds were broken down and reconstructed into defensive technologies. "We're not just surviving," Aisha muttered, her hands dancing across quantum interfaces. "We're evolving." The tactical implications were enormous. A defensive system that could think. Communication networks that could predict potential threats before they manifested. Energy systems that turned planetary hostility into a resource. Marcus's adaptive response units, previously impressive drone systems, were now something else entirely. Each unit was essentially a distributed intelligence, capable of combining, separating, and reforming based on tactical needs. They were less machines and more like a collective intelligence that could reshape itself at will. Traditional military doctrine is about force, Marcus explained during a strategy briefing. "We're developing a system of pure potential." The young researchers worked with a kind of controlled excitement. They weren't just developing new technologies. They were reimagining the very concept of technological development. By the time the first light of Novus's twin suns broke over the horizon, the colony had transformed. They were no longer just survivors. They were architects of a new kind of technological existence. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of technological innovation. And they were just getting started. The first wave of alien attacks came with a precision that suggested absolute technological superiority. 50 massive energy projectiles screamed through Novus's atmosphere, each capable of vaporizing entire city complexes. To any other species, it would have been a moment of absolute terror. To the humans of Novus, it was an opportunity. Marcus Chen's voice remained calm as tactical displays erupted with incoming threat indicators. "Adaptive Response Protocol Omega-9, he commanded, his neural interface linking directly with the colony's defensive systems. The alien weapons were masterpieces of destructive engineering. Quantum-phased energy projectiles that could penetrate traditional defensive barriers, guided by predictive algorithms that seemed to understand defensive patterns before they could be implemented. They represented the pinnacle of offensive technological capability. What they didn't understand was that humanity had already rewritten the rules of defense. The first projectiles encountered something entirely unexpected. Instead of solid defensive barriers, they met a living, breathing defensive ecosystem. Quantum adaptive shields that could predict and redirect energy signatures. Molecular camouflage systems that could literally reshape the planetary landscape in milliseconds. Where a projectile should have struck a critical infrastructure point, it found nothing. The entire section of the colony simply wasn't there. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo watched from the Quantum Coordination Center, her augmented eyes tracking multiple dimensional layers of conflict. "They're fighting a three-dimensional war," she muttered. "We're operating in 11. The colony's defensive systems were more than just technological. They were a form of collective intelligence. Each defensive module could communicate, adapt, and reshape itself faster than the alien targeting systems could recalibrate. Entire sections of the colony could shift, merge, or disappear with a computational thought. Marcus's adaptive response units were the true game changers. What appeared to be simple defensive drones were actually distributed intelligence nodes. They could combine into larger combat forms, break apart into microscopic infiltration units, or transform their molecular structure to match any environmental condition. "We're not defending," Marcus explained to his tactical team. "We're having a conversation of pure potential." The alien vessel attempted multiple attack vectors: energy weapon barrages, quantum disruption pulses, molecular destabilization beams. Each attack was met with a response that defied traditional understanding of warfare. When a massive quantum disruption pulse should have disabled the colony's communication networks, it instead found itself redirected. The pulse was captured, analyzed, and then used to send a message back to the alien vessel, a complex mathematical communication that was simultaneously a weapon, a message, and a form of psychological warfare. Dr. Elena Rodriguez oversaw the broader strategic implications. This wasn't just about surviving an attack. This was about redefining the very concept of conflict. Warfare is information, she told her strategy team. And we're writing a language they've never seen before. The colony's defensive systems transformed the entire planet into a weapon. Geological formations could be reshaped. Atmospheric conditions could be manipulated. Energy signatures could be redirected, duplicated, or made to simply disappear. After 6 hours of what should have been a devastating assault, the alien vessel retreated, not defeated, not destroyed, but fundamentally confused. They had attacked a colony. They had encountered something that wasn't a colony at all. They had found a living, thinking system that understood conflict at a level they could not comprehend. Humanity had just redefined the rules of engagement, and they were just getting started. The quantum communication burst arrived 2 standard galactic cycles after the initial conflict, carrying with it a message that would redefine interstellar understanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez decoded the transmission in the colony's central analysis chamber, a space that was equal parts scientific laboratory and philosophical exploration ground. Her augmented neural interfaces processed multiple layers of communication simultaneously, linguistic patterns, quantum signatures, mathematical constructs that existed beyond traditional communication paradigms. "They're trying to understand us," she said quietly to Marcus Chen, who stood nearby monitoring potential defensive responses. The alien civilization, known in their own communication matrices as the Varkax Collective, had encountered something fundamentally incomprehensible. Their initial assessment of humanity had been catastrophically wrong. What they had perceived as a vulnerable colony was actually a living, adaptive system that challenged every fundamental concept of technological and biological evolution. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo's breakthrough in genetic and technological adaptation became the cornerstone of their revelation. The humans of Novus were not just survivors. They were a species in active, continuous transformation. Genetic modifications went far beyond simple survival enhancements. Each colonist carried adaptive genetic matrices that could respond to environmental challenges in real time. Radiation resistance wasn't just a protective mechanism, it was an active evolutionary process. Metabolic systems could reorganize themselves to extract nutrition from environments that would kill most biological entities. "We're not just changing to survive," Aisha explained during a comprehensive research briefing. "We're changing to understand, to explore, to become something entirely new." The technological systems developed on Novus defied traditional understanding of engineering. Molecular assemblers had evolved into something between technology and living organisms. Defensive systems were less about protection and more about communication, a constant dialogue with environmental conditions. Marcus's adaptive response units demonstrated this most dramatically. What had begun as defensive drone systems had become distributed intelligence networks. Each unit could combine, separate, transform, thinking and adapting faster than traditional computational systems could even register change. The Varkax communication burst revealed their fundamental shock. They had encountered species that adapted. They had encountered technological systems that learned. But they had never encountered a civilization that did both simultaneously, at a planetary scale. Genetic researchers discovered something even more profound. The human colonists weren't just adapting to Novus. They were becoming something new. Cellular structures that could photosynthesize, neural networks that could process quantum information directly, respiratory systems that could extract oxygen from previously toxic atmospheric compounds. "We're not colonizing this planet," Elena realized during one late-night analysis session. "We're becoming this planet." The revelation extended beyond physical adaptation. The colony's communication and computational systems had developed a form of collective intelligence that existed between traditional definitions of individual and group consciousness. Each colonist was simultaneously themselves and part of a larger thinking system. The Varkax communication carried an unexpected element, a form of respect that bordered on existential fear. They had attacked what they thought was a vulnerable colony. They had encountered a living, thinking system that understood conflict as a form of communication. "They're asking to communicate," Marcus noted, his cybernetic eye parsing multiple layers of the transmission. Not as conquerors, not as potential threats, but as students. Humanity had done more than survive. They had transformed the very concept of survival. They had become potential. Pure, unlimited potential. The first joint conference between humans and the Varkax Collective took place not in a traditional meeting space, but in a quantum communication matrix that defied conventional understanding of physical interaction. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a holographic representation that was simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Her form shifted, not through technological projection, but through a fundamental reimagining of biological and quantum potential. Behind her, the transformed landscape of Novus stretched out, a living testament to human adaptation. "We are not what you expected," she began, her words translating across multiple dimensional communication layers. The Varkax representatives, beings of pure quantum consciousness, responded with a communication that was part language, part mathematical construct, part emotional resonance. They had come to understand something profound about humanity. This was not a species to be categorized, conquered, or even fully comprehended. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo's genetic research had become the bridge of understanding. The human colonists of Novus were no longer simply human in the traditional sense. They had become something else, a living, adaptive system that could transform faster than any known species in the known galaxy. Genetic modifications had evolved beyond simple survival enhancements. Each colonist carried adaptive matrices that could restructure themselves in real time. Cellular structures could photosynthesize, process quantum information, extract nutrition from environments that would destroy most biological entities. The line between technology and biology had become meaningless. Marcus Chen, now more quantum computational matrix than traditional human, represented the tactical evolution of the species. His adaptive response capabilities had become a language of potential, a way of understanding conflict that transcended traditional concepts of warfare and defense. The Varkax communicated their fundamental revelation. Humanity was not a species to be understood, but a process of continuous transformation. "We believed we were advanced," the quantum collective transmitted. "We now understand we were merely waiting." Novus itself had become more than a planet. It was a living system, with the human colony integrated into its geological, atmospheric, and quantum structures. Defensive systems were now indistinguishable from the planet's natural processes. Communication networks existed in layers that human and alien minds could barely comprehend. The conference was not a moment of conquest or submission. It was a negotiation of potential. The humans of Novus offered something unprecedented, not just technological exchange, but a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent life could be. Their adaptive systems could be integrated with Varkax technologies in ways that would transform entire galactic understanding of evolution, communication, and potential. "We are not a destination," Elena explained. "We are a process." The Varkax Collective began to understand that humanity represented something entirely new in the galactic ecosystem. Not a species to be studied, but a form of adaptive potential that could reshape entire planetary and technological systems. Genetic researchers had discovered that the human colonists were developing capabilities that went beyond traditional biological limitations. Neural networks that could process quantum information directly, respiratory systems that could extract nutrients from previously toxic environments, sensory capabilities that extended beyond traditional electromagnetic spectrums. The conference became a moment of galactic significance. The Varkaks were not conquering or being conquered. They were witnessing the emergence of a new form of intelligent life. Humanity had done more than survive. They had transformed the very concept of survival. They had become potential itself. Pure, unlimited, transformative.